Thanks. Emily, can you jump to the next slide? We'll let people answer the question while we get everyone in and get ready to get started.
Okay.
Thank you.
hmm
So welcome to our AD meeting for March. Just our icebreaker question this month is if you had to teach a class on one thing, what would you teach? I'm curious to hear all of your responses and looking forward to learning a little bit more about each of you through your responses. And we'll give people just a second to finish joining, and then we'll jump right in with our assessment director meeting for March. Um, as you can see, if you opened up the slide deck from Sandra, we don't have a ton today, so I'm hoping that we'll get through fairly quickly and be able to answer any questions that you have and give you a little bit of time back to your day today. Interesting. I'm seeing some very interesting classes. I'd love to attend many of these, just to learn more myself. Okay, Emily, I think we can jump to our quote for the month. This month, the quote comes from Teddy Roosevelt, President Theodore Roosevelt. He said, "Far and away the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing." And I'm sure many of you have felt that in your own life, as I know I have with my life as well. So appreciate that thinking about hard work being a thing that's a valuable and worthwhile in the end. Okay, our next slide is board updates. So on the board updates, this past March board meeting and the full board meeting, there was only one thing that really was pertaining specifically to assessment, and that was Board Rule R277604, which is the board rule about private school students, homeschool students, students that are on scholarship or Utah Fits All scholarship, and BIE student participation on public assessment. And the requirement that you all have a plan in place for when one of those private school homeschool scholarship students would like to participate in any of our state assessments, that they have the ability to do so. And your requirement is that you have a plan to allow for that. So just a reminder, I know that there was several years ago, we asked each of you if you were willing to share those plans. For some people, if you're thinking, wait a second, I don't know if we have a plan in place, that would probably be a good thing to look into. Reviewing that rule, it's linked there. This one was just a continuation, so nothing changed on the rule. It was just the 5 year, every 5 years, we take a look at the rules and see if they are still necessary or need updates or anything like that. And there were actually no changes made. So it continues on as is, but is a good reminder for all of you to take a look at your plans and ensure that you have them in place. Your schools, mostly secretaries at the schools, know what to do if people call and ask if you have a plan in place for students to be able to participate in assessments at your schools. Then looking forward in the April-May board meeting, there was in the Standards and Assessment Committee meeting, Julie Clark presented her quarterly update on SB 127. That's our big reading improvement bill from a couple years ago. She provided a really in-depth look. It's not anything that was new, but a really good description of the difference between reading on grade level and reading at benchmark level on a cadence, and the difference between what's reported and how things are reported. If you get questions on those or people have questions, our board members recommended going back to that recording from the March Standards Assessment Committee meeting to review that. So that will be coming to the full board in May, just a reminder of what was presented. But if you have people that have questions about what the reading on grade level versus reading at benchmark designations mean, there's a pretty good in-depth description in that committee meeting. So that will be brought forward to our full board just for their information. Additionally, something that I know many of you have had questions on and are reaching out to us about. Um, Due to some of the changes with legislation that's passed session, there was the repeal in HB 312 of the requirement for the early math plan, and and thinking through those early learning plans and some repeals to those. So Due to that, our state board has to make some changes to Rule R277406, which is the Acadian or early math and early reading assessments. Those changes take some time. So the timeline for making those changes and us for knowing next steps or requirements for our math assessment will take a little bit of time. So the plan right now is that that rule will be reviewed by our Standards Assessment Committee in the April committee meeting, and then it will go to full board in the May board meeting. So we won't know for sure anything else about elementary math assessments until after that May board meeting and new rule is put into place. Um, we don't have a ton more information other than that, and I know that can be frustrating, but really the why is just that it takes some time. So due to legislation changes, it's going to take a little bit of time, and we have to still follow this process through board rule to update requirements for the early math assessment. So those are to be determined, and we will keep you posted as soon as we know anything else about that. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer what I can. We don't know a ton yet, though. Like I said, we don't know exactly what that means for the fall yet, until after the April board meeting where we get April committee meetings where we'll get recommendations for the rule change. And then those will be finalized in the May full board meeting. So we don't know for sure about fall until then. And I know that's a tight timeline, knowing and understanding what the requirements will be for the fall assessment. I know our leadership is aware of that timeline, and know that that can be something that you all are in the middle of planning for, and something that we are aware of, but know that we have to work through the process of understanding legislation and then changing that in rule and what that looks like. So that's our next steps for board meetings coming up in April and May. On our next slide, the legislative updates, our leadership is asked, I know typically in this March board, or excuse me, March AD meeting, we've provided some updates on any of the changes with legislation and what that means for our assessment world. Um, so Emily, on the next slide, if you'll click to the next slide, it just a description of our leadership has asked that we have some consistency with sharing to each of the groups, and also wants to make sure that the superintendents, the LEA superintendents, are getting that information and are able to share that consistently with all of you as well. So they've asked us to hold on sharing any legislative updates until after the superintendents get an update from our state superintendent on April 20th. So April 20th, the state superintendent will be meeting with LEA superintendents, providing any legislative updates. And then after that, we'll be able to share that same consistent message with all of you. So if you have other questions on legislative updates or things you've been following, you're welcome to reach out to us. And if there's specific or direct questions, there's some things we can answer. But the request has been that there be consistent communication to all LEA leadership, and that starts with your superintendents. So we're going to follow that plan, and after April 20th, we'll move forward with any updates that we can. In the meantime, if you have questions about specific legislation that passed or not passed, you can follow along with that USBE 2026 legislative session page, or just on the state's legislative page to see particular updates. But on that 26th, the USBE page, you can see all of the bills that passed that are around education. Any questions on legislative things before we move past that one?
So there was a question in the chat. Does this mean a change for the fall 2026 regarding Acadian's math?
Oh, yeah. And I responded to that one. So that's what I said. We don't know yet about the fall until
Yeah.
after the May board meeting. So I know that timeline is tight. And like I said, our leadership is aware of the requirements right now and what that looks like for the fall and what we're looking at from the assessment side of things. They're aware of that, but understand that we have to follow through the timeline of after the legislation passes, now we have to move through with rule, and they're pushing it through. It's already on the agenda for the April committee meeting. So they're pushing it through as fast as they can, but we do still have to follow the process for changing the rule. So we don't know for sure what that means for fall yet. As soon as we know more, though, we will make sure we share that with all of you. And then Catherine, does the invite to superintendents get sent to charter leaders as well? I'm unsure. I assumed that that was the case, but I'm not positive on that actually. So I know that the leadership meeting on April 20th. Let me look into that and follow-ups because I assumed that it would go to all LEA, the main leader, but I don't know for sure. So I'll follow up on that to make sure that that's something that's being shared. And if that meeting is not also for charter leadership, that the same message is being shared with the charter school board and their leadership in meetings. So let me follow up on that as soon as my section's done. I'll reach out and get an answer for that one. Okay, Emily, on the next slide, talk a little bit about ACT science. So just a reminder, we're in the middle of our testing windows. Reminder for this year for ACT this spring, Utah still administers all 4 sections, so reading, English, math, and science, although ACT has changed how they calculate their composite score. So the students will receive a composite score that's calculated based off of their reading, English, and math scores. They will still also receive a STEM score that's calculated with their math and science score, but science won't be used to calculate their composite score for the individual student. However, in our ESSA plan and in our just accountability rules, we're still using that science score to calculate the composite scores for science. So all 4 sections will be used for accountability. Excuse me, not for science, for accountability. So science will be included in their accountability scores, but the students will not be receiving, or their scores will not be calculated on their individual score. Composite won't be using science. Sorry, I'm getting that all the words are wrong there, but let me say that one more time. The student level science or composite scores will not be calculated with science, but the accountability scores for the school will be calculated using science. We've had some conversations about what that looks like for the future. We have our contract with ACT ends in summer of 2007, so 27. So we have 1 more year of administration and this current contract. Our question is, do you feel like it would be beneficial for all the 11th grade students in Utah to continue to take the science test with all students? Or do you feel like it would be beneficial to make the science test optional for the spring 27 administration? We're bringing this as a agenda item to our APAC meeting, so our policy advisors will weigh in on this, but we're interested in getting feedback from all of you and your science staff, your counselors, people who work with ACT on the benefits of continuing to administer the science to all students or move it to optional. We've also reached out to USBE, and USBE is reaching out to the universities to gather information from the universities on the science administration as well. So before we could present this to our APAC meeting in May, we'd like to get some feedback and just some general data on feelings of continuing to administer the science assessment. So Brooke, your question, only the ACT composite score is used in accountability though. Does it mean the different ACT composite score will be calculated for the accountability system? Yeah, so ACT is calculating that for us, although we can do that. It's a straight average of each of the 4 sections is how they calculate the composite score, but they are providing Utah the accountability scores of the composites calculated. So they are providing that for us, but the student score, their composite will not include the science. So we are calculating the accountability system score with science for the spring 26 administration. And our question is, looking forward at the 27, for sure the 27, and then after that we'll move into a new contract. But for sure for the 27 year, would there be an interest in continuing to administer science to all students? On the next slide, there is a link, and Scott also put a link to the one pager that we've created for the ACT survey. And in the survey is a link to the one pager for information on ACT. There's a link to a survey. We understand that we're getting close into spring break times and wanted to give you a little bit of time to be able to reach out to people and get feedback and to be able to respond to the survey. But you're also welcome to share the survey with other people for other people to respond. So we're interested in getting feedback on participation with the science administration to all 11th grade students, yes or no? And then additional feedback if you have additional feedback. I know a couple of people have already reached out to us and said and had heard of this topic and had already reached out to people. So if you want to fill out that survey with that same information, you're welcome to, but we also already have information if you've emailed us already. Savannah's question, how will not taking the science portion affect students in college? For example, if a student opts not to take the science test because they think they're not going to college, then decide to attend and they need that for a score, what happens then? Do they take only that section? No, they wouldn't take only that section. So for right now, that's what we're talking with Yushi about is how the universities would use that science score if they're using that specifically. The students, when they submit, most of the universities aren't asking for ACT scores for admittance into college. They're looking at it more for scholarships. So that's been one of the other questions that we've asked Yushi to look into is what the universities are looking at for scholarships, if they're looking at a STEM score or not. So that could be something that would impact a student if they opt to not to, if we don't make science required for all 11th grade students and it's optional and they choose not to take it, then they may not have a science score and they would likely have to pay to take an ACT test if they needed that to come again. They do have the option to do the super score as well. So the super score is something that can happen when students take more than one ACT test. But really, we're just interested in your feedback as to and if you'll reach out to those that also work with the ACT field. The responses on science for all students or science as an optional, specifically for next year, but that would also likely impact our conversations for moving forward in contracts for the next year after we end our contract with ACT in summer of 27. So looking for your information, sharing feedback with us, and appreciate that ahead of time. Thank you. Any other questions on ACT or science or any of the other board meeting or legislative questions? And if you think of other things or have other questions that you'd like us to weigh in on, please reach out to us. We're happy to respond either in email or setting up meetings. Okay, thank you, thank you. I think Scott's next.
Yes, I am. Hello, everybody. Good to see you today. Just a couple of quick things. Assessment observation visits have started taking place. If the school is going to receive a visit, they'll receive an email directly from me that has the links to all the surveys we appreciate being filled out for informational purposes. You can go to the next slide, Emily, for sure. We had over 150 schools sign up, and we don't have that many people. So we're picking what fits into other people's schedules, knowing that testing's happening and a bunch of other things are happening. And so if we don't contact the school, we're not coming. We'll contact you. We'll also copy you on that correspondence. We always copy you, and we will also copy the people who are visiting there so they know who's coming. And so it's not a surprise, right? We're not trying to surprise anyone. We're not just trying to drop in. Remember, we're just interested in feedback on RISE and DLM and anything we can do to improve the test, what the experience is like, anything about any assessments in general. We have a simple set of questions we ask in the debriefing afterwards that just has to go, what's going good about testing, or what could you tell us that could help improve the thing, improve all of the things for testing for you. So this is not a compliance check. It's just us being able to actually see good testing going on. And I'll tell you from my own personal experience, being able to visit the schools, it's a lot of fun. It's fun to see the kids. It's fun to see the teachers interacting with them. It's fun to see them taking the test, and just to see the good things that are happening on that. That confirmation is going to depend, Cassidy, on when they signed up. For example, if they signed up for in May, it's going to be a bit because we're just getting the early April ones sent out right now. I'm going to be sending a bunch of those confirmation emails out today and tomorrow. I hope tomorrow. Tomorrow's a little busy day for me, but we'll get a bunch of those out. And we've got a lot of them selected already on our master list. I think we're up around 40 something schools that we've been able to get visits. Sorry, 32 schools so far we've been able to get people to sign up for. We got more of us signing up for other visits. And I got a couple other ones that I got through email that didn't come in on the survey that we're working on fitting in also. But earlier ones first, because we're going to be going first. But I have one that's testing, a couple schools testing May 12th, maybe in 3 weeks, hopefully. It takes a while to get all those orders scheduled and fitted in. So, but definitely a couple weeks before the visits. Also, just so you all know, it's not on the slide for this. I don't think it needs a slide, but I'm going out of town for a couple weeks. Before I started in this new position of being a coordinator, we had planned to take our granddaughter to Japan to see the cherry blossoms. And so we're going to be doing that. And so I'm going to be gone for a couple weeks. You'll see my out of office if you can copy me on any emails, advising you maybe to call the help desk. But if there is something that has an ethical issue or has an assessment breach, please make sure you copy Sydney on that, because that way we can get that taken care of, since I won't be around to handle that right away. And hopefully none of that happens, right? We love not having anything happen with ethical breaches or any other things happening like that with issues on the test. And so far it seems to be going fairly well this year. So other than that, if there's no other questions, hey, just one slide.
All right, and now it's my turn. Talk about assessment rostering. All right, next slide. Just general reminders for everybody. Please allow 24 to 48 hours after making changes or enrolling a student for their record to show up in an assessment platform. Student record changes can cause students to drop from assessment rostering. We've noticed this week there are some schools that started Q4 and it's dropping some students off. So that's going to happen like clockwork. You change a term, students are going to drop off, and then they'll come right back. Usual, if you add a teacher cactus ID to their account in Tide, you're going to have to wait for a nightly upload to go through for a teacher to be connected to rosters. And as always, UTREX errors. They will keep students from rostering. So keep on top of those UTREX errors. Next slide. And if you are seeing students that aren't rostering for Utah Aspire Plus, just remember, check those school entry and exit dates. Are they enrolled? Is the 1% flag marked for them? And are they enrolled at other schools? You might not be able to check to see if a student is enrolled in another school, but I can. So if you are having problems with the student rostering, you can just shoot me an email and I'll help you check on that. For RISE, remember, watch out for those competing core codes. Check those course, exit, and entry dates. Excuse me. And for RISE, make sure that 1% flag again isn't marked. Next slide. Just our duly enrolled students, just remember, if a student is enrolled anywhere and has an SSID, they can go to whatever location and test for Utah Aspire Plus and RISE. You don't have to do any special rostering for them. They are rostered somewhere else, they can come and test. Just make sure you're notifying that other LEA where they are rostering. And those students should have a smooth experience testing at other locations. Next slide. That's about it for me today. I was pretty quick. Excuse me. I just want to give you an update on RISE. We did have a lot of students hanging around from the beginning of year that transferred out. RISE, the Tide team, they have taken care of that. So you shouldn't see any old students hanging around in Tide. If you still do, go ahead and shoot me an email and I will check on those because they should not be there anymore. And I think that's it for me.
All right, good morning. Time for our WIDA portion of the meeting. So, next slide, please. There is one more for the spring free webinar. If you can't make it, do remember that these trainings, these free trainings are recorded and they are posted in the WIDA Secure portal. So you can go and watch the recording and access all the slides and materials that were given during these trainings. So if you can't make it, but the next one is going to be May 19th, and that one's going to be reviewing AMS and DRC, so like the secure browser, Insight Secure Browser, all the different technical enhancements and changes that will be coming up. So I would strongly encourage you to please share this with your IT people so they know. I did get some emails and calls regarding technology and IT people not having all the information that they need to be able to update student devices and everything. So please just make sure that this information is shared. Next slide. All right, so our testing. Thank you so much. We have completed another successful year of access testing, and thank you for all you do. So far, our numbers are looking fabulous. Our participation is looking to be right in line with what we've seen in past years. The deadline to ship materials passed. That was the 16th, so I believe that was this Monday. And if you have everything postmarked for the 16th, that is all considered on time. I have been getting reports that UPS hasn't been able to come and pick materials up. Just as long as things are postmarked on the 16th, you should be fine. If you have any questions or concerns, I don't have access to any of the shipping information, but DRC does, and you should have shipping tracking information as well, and DRC would need that information. So that way they can help you. I would contact DRC directly since I don't have access to that. But if you need me to be involved, I'm happy to support that as well. So Tara Lynn, thank you. I know that your district has had struggles with getting items picked up. Just remember, as long as you did what you were supposed to do on time, I don't believe we should worry about any late reporting. We'll take this on a LEA by LEA basis, and I'm happy to support you in all that. All right, so the next big thing that's going to be coming up, yeah, at the end of this month, there's going to be the 2-week window for the pre-reporting data validation. This is done by you, the LEAs. It should be done by the assessment director or whoever you have assigned this to, but just please make sure that you are communicating everything. You will be getting directions to for how to do this, I believe, on Monday. So you guys are getting actually an extra couple days and heads up. I have linked the directions for how to do the data validation here. The biggest thing with your data validation that we would ask that you do is just ensuring that all the student demographic information, names, SSIDs, birth dates, make sure all of that information is correct. If it's off by one letter, by one number, that's where we always see the issues, especially for any of the paper forms. And then also, if you did not have a chance to enter do not score codes, so if a student was supposed to test, they were absent, or maybe sick or something like that, right? They could not finish the test or couldn't test, then you could also go back and add those in during this data validation process. Now, you will be getting those reports um, online first on April 30th. If you notice errors in any reports, we still do have time to to fix those errors with Marine, when we do the state level data validation. It's going to be really important that you communicate any errors so we can fix them if they were not caught by you. So, if the student had a writing booklet that was marked do not score, do you still enter that in the system as well? Thank you for asking that, Jen. Um, if it's already marked as do not score, you should see that in your pre-reporting data validation. If it's not showing there, then you'll need to check that. Marina, just wanted to give you an opportunity really quickly to jump in here if there's anything else that you wanted to add when it comes to this.
No, just it's really important. Um, I do state data validation, but I'm looking at a whole state's worth of data when I do that, and sometimes things can slip through. You know your LEA data, so it's a really important step for you guys to check your data. I am 100% here for you to help with your LEA data validation. So if you have any questions, you need someone to help you do it, I am here for you because it's a really, really important step, and it helps everything down the line to do this step.
Yeah. Sure does. We are still trying to fix even very unique situations from tests from last year that were never caught. So, and like there's always going to be unique situations, especially if you have students transferring from one LEA to another LEA. So those ones will be big ones to keep an eye out for as well. Again, we just appreciate your time and attention to all of this. So with that, let's move on. All right, so this is now my second installment of WIDA assessments. Did you know? I am trying to, in all of our AD meetings, as more and more LEAs and teachers reach out with questions, concerns about our WIDA assessments, as those questions come in and I start to see a lot of common things, themes or questions, I'm trying to address those so this can be shared a little more widely. So just remember in our last AD meeting, we discussed the purpose of access testing versus other assessments that the state has. And so this month we are going to be talking about a question that we've been getting quite a bit, and it's regarding access and screener length. Okay. And so I wanted to just start out with an analogy. People have been asking, why is WIDA access so long? And why is screener so short? And again, we have to think about the purposes. So the screener is exactly in the name. It's a screener to identify students that should receive services. So the analogy I'd like to use is thinking of screener as a vision test at school. It's just a quick and focused assessment to determine whether or not more support is needed, right? So again, screening. We know that there is possibly a vision problem that needs to be addressed, or screening, there is an academic English, possibility that this student needs support, right? So let's get the student into services and qualify them. Access is like the full-blown eye exam, right? It's going to take more time, it's going to be more questions, but it's also going to provide a little more information to guide those next steps, right? So again, different purposes for what we're looking for. So if we go to the next slide, um, again, screener is really the purpose is, does this student need academic English language services and support? We are only getting a proficiency measure here to say, yes, this student does need support. Access is going to go a lot deeper because it's saying, does the student understand and use academic English, and how much have they grown, right? So access is going to be measuring not just proficiency like screener, but also growth. And that growth is also used for state and federal accountability purposes, right? And so we need a more robust test, especially for you LEAs. We don't want something really like that broad 30,000-foot view when it comes to your accountability, right? We want to make sure that it is beyond accurate, and that you have really good, valid data, especially if it's going to be a part of growth and accountability. So, again, if you get these questions, I'm hoping that our new installments of WIDA assessments, did you know, help you in those conversations that you may be getting from teachers or educators in your LEAs, or if even these are questions that you may have had. We are beyond happy to engage in these conversations and help you all build a better, deeper understanding of it all. We ask a lot of you. Y'all are in charge of tons of tests, so it's hard to keep it all straight, but we are happy to support you in building that foundational knowledge. So let us know if you ever do have questions. I love when these concerns come and when I start to see patterns, because then it lets me know, okay, I need to address this and provide a little more explanation to everyone. So, all right. Next slide. This one again is hopefully nothing new, but this is also a question that I've been getting. I know a lot of our LEAs have been looking at the WIDA Access interpretive guide to reports, and I do know that a lot of people have seen, hey, it says to be very careful about, determining growth and all that kind of stuff and exiting students. That is because there is a standard setting taking place. We here in Utah are very fortunate because the way that we do calculate growth happens to be a lot easier than what other states do. So for you all, the most important thing you need to know is business as usual. We want you to exit students per the typical process. You do not have to wait. We want you to go ahead and do what you need to do that you normally do every year. All of the hard work is going to be happening on the back end with us, USBE, Marine, our data and statistics department, and also in partnership with WIDA to make everything else per growth just move hopefully quickly and efficiently, and make sure that you, the LEAs, experience no hiccups in the process. So that is our hope. Again, for this year, everything will continue the way you expect it to. So, again, if you need to message that out to any partners, in your ALS, Alternative Language Services Title III, please make sure you're communicating this. This has been shared with ALS and Title III directors, but again, communication really, really helps here. And then our next slide, again, this is a reminder. We are still waiting to hear back. So fingers crossed that eventually our alternate access exit criteria is approved. I wish I had better news to say. We just are waiting to hear back. And as soon as it is approved, which we're hoping it will be, we will message all out. We thank you for your patience, and we feel you. Do know, like, we hear you, we feel you, we are with you, and we're really leaning into our patience as well. So good time for us to all practice that skill. But again, until we have that approved, we are so sorry we can't exit those kiddos. We really hope it's coming though. All right. And then for the last slide, just our contact information. I really appreciate your amazing good communication with us and your patience if you are calling and us getting back to you. We love hearing from you, and the more you communicate with us, the better we can support you all and address your needs. So thank you for a fabulous, again, successful access test administration season, and let us know what we can do to better support you all in the process. So that is it.
All right, good morning, everyone. As Megan said, we know that you oversee a lot of assessments for your LEA, so I just wanted to get PEEP on your radar and start thinking about those for those programs and LEAs that use the PEEP assessment. So on the next slide here, we have the testing window. Just a reminder that that is the last 4 weeks of the preschool program. And the data is due in Data Gateway by June 15th of this year. So just as you start planning and making preparations for the upcoming months, remember the PEEP window there. And also remember that everyone who administers the PEEP exit needs to take the training. So everyone does need to take training annually, either the full exit course, which is listed there, and that's just for first-time assessors, or the refresh course for those who have previously taken the full course. So both of those links are listed there. Please share that information out with those who need to give the PEEP exit. In the chat, it says, is there a walkthrough for pre-K teachers to sign up for a Cactus account in the new system? So
Oh.
I'm going to let Teresa answer that one.
It is changing over to USIMS, and we will work with our IT department to make sure that we have that information for you. It hasn't happened yet, but it will be transitioning this summer.
Great question, Brittany. Thank you for bringing that up. And thank you, Teresa. Okay, so that's all that I have for PEEP this month. Just wanting to put that on your radar, just reminding of that required annual training. And if there are any more questions about PEEP, then we will go ahead and jump into Acadience. All right. So on the next slide here for Acadience, Jared and I did a data analysis training of MOY data last month. These trainings are available on the USBE Assessment and Accountability YouTube channel. So those links are listed there. We did 2 different trainings, one directed specifically for teachers looking at their classroom data, and then a second one for school leaders looking at school-wide data. So both of those are available for viewing if you would like to take a look at those. And on our next slide here, again, another reminder for upcoming planning that our EOI testing window for Acadience runs from April 15th to June 15th. So that's the full 8-week window. Your data entry and parent notifications do need to be done by June 30th after the testing window has closed. So also please keep that in mind that you will need to still send out those EOI parent notifications and have that data entry in by June 30th. Again, required for grades K through 3 for both reading and math. And then for grades 4 through 6, it is optional for reading. And on our next slide, just a reminder, as you are getting into planning your EOY testing, the Pathways of Progress does line up with that last date that is set in ALO. So that's the date that correlates to the student's goal. So the student needs to hit their goal by that date in order to make typical or above growth. On our next slide here, it's just a reminder that if students are tested after that last date set in ALO, their goal will increase because they will have more instructional days. So just keep that in mind if you're planning on doing any testing after the last date set in ALO, because ALO will only let you set the 4-week window. You do have the full 8 weeks to test. Just keep in mind that if you do test after that last date, their goal is going to increase because they will have more instructional time. That is all that we have for Acadians this month. Mine and Jared's contact information was listed on that title slide. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us. Thank you.
Tracy might
Doesn't
not
look like,
be, yeah.
I was gonna say, I don't think Tracy has access. She can't unmute. So we tried, Emily, but we weren't able to do it. We didn't have enough power.
Okay, try it now, Tracy. I had to scroll and find you.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And I apologize, I have a printer going off in my office right now, and my camera's not working. So all the things are happening in my world today. Okay, DLM, here we go. Here are your updates for right now. So our spring testing window is open. It opened up March 9th, and it goes until the last 2 weeks of your guys's school year. I've been getting a lot of questions around science field testing. So this is just your reminder that this year we will have 2 sets of field tests that happen for students. Those are going to deliver down to the system at the same time everything else does, and teachers will know that those are the field testlets because they'll see that capital F and capital T in the test session name. So I recommend that teachers go ahead and complete those operational assessments first before they go ahead and do field testlets. And if they have got students with some behavior problems or things where it's taken them everything they have or the majority of that window to get through those operational testlets, please skip the field testlets. However, we do need enough participants, or we're going to have to do a full set of field testing next fall for those new updated science standards. Okay, go ahead, next slide. Here's just a reminder, as a district test coordinator, here's your checklist, the things that you need to be doing. And you can find this also on the DLM District Test Coordinator Padlet that I have. There's that checklist there that you can download. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so monitoring, just a reminder, here are the different extracts that are available in the DLM website for you to monitor what's going on as far as teachers' training status, their security agreement. Do we have any students that still need to be rostered? Have teachers completed first contact surveys? Monitoring that test information page, and then you have that on-demand special circumstance file that you can look at to see, where you're at in entering those things. So these are all found under that reports tab under data extracts and educator portal. And last month I did walk through all of these and provided screenshots in the slides. So if you need reference, you can go back to the slides from last month to look at that. Okay, next slide. So here's where we currently are right now as of yesterday at about noon. So right now we have a little over 2,000 users with a teacher role that are either active or pending in DLM. We have a little over 1,000 of those teachers that have not signed in yet to Educator Portal. So if you're running that extract to see who's completed the security agreement, if they have not done so, that means they haven't even logged in, because that is the very first thing that pops up every year when you log in. And then we are sitting where we have about 1,200 users with a teacher role that have not completed training. And again, some of you folks out there with a district role also have a teacher role. So it may be appropriate in your district, but just kind of high level overview of where we sit statewide with that. Okay, and on the next slide, we're going to dig into student data. So as of right now, we have 4,574 students currently enrolled in DLM. So this dropped by a little bit since last month. So we may have some IEP team decisions that have been made there. Currently, right now, out of those 4,500 students, we only have 298 that are not rostered for ELA. 323 not rostered for math, and 276 not rostered for science. We are always going to expect that there's less students in science because we don't test third graders. If there's that discrepancy between ELA and math, what that probably means is we've got students that have landed on an ELA roster for teachers but are not there for math. So if those students are not rostered, testlets will not delivered. So you're going to want to go back and check that rostering status in your school. Okay, first contact surveys. So where we're at with those 4,500 students, right now I've got 894 first contact surveys that are ready to submit, meaning teachers still just need to get in and they need to look over that first contact survey and submit it. 235 have not even started, and I've got 14 in progress. So that status on that first contact survey must be completed for testlets to deliver to the system. And so now that we are in the testing window, if a teacher completes those first contact surveys today, it's going to take the system overnight to pick that information up and deliver those testlets. So DLM usually typically runs and pushes all of their updated loads anywhere between 9 to 11 p.m. So if they get those completed before 5 o'clock, they leave today, 24 hours for those testlets to deliver. Okay, go ahead. Next slide. Okay, so here's where we are with testing progress, just a little over a week into the window. So I've got over 1,000 students in ELA that have completed one testlet and 112 across the state that are done. They've completed the full blueprint for ELA. We've got 898 in math with one testlet, and 125 have done all their math testing. 783 have completed one testlet in science, and 81 students have completed all of their testing. And so a nice reminder, at one testlet, a student is considered a participant. They will also receive a DLM score report. One testlet is not going to produce a valid proficiency level, but they are considered a participant and will produce a score report. And so if you have students that, as long as they've completed one testlet, you do not have to enter any special circumstance codes for those students. They're considered a completer. Okay, go ahead, next slide. Okay, test information page. So we've been talking to you all year. This came out last year. We are monitoring and really trying to hit this home with both teachers and you folks out in the field that support this from the district level. We need teachers accessing this test information page. So we have right now, out of our testlets that have been completed, 46 of those testlets, teachers did not click on that test information page. And so there is a data extract in DLM that you can kind of look at that. You'll have to do some filtering, but you can look and see of my testlets that have been completed, which teachers, and it will tell you the teacher's name. And it literally is click data. There's a little PDF icon in the test management system. When they go and they log into the test sessions, they see the test ticket, and then right next to it is the test information page. And the more concerning part of this is, of our 46% that those test information pages were not accessed, 25% of those were testlets at the initial precursor level, meaning that is our lowest linkage level. And those testlets are teacher delivered testlets, meaning that there is materials that teachers have to gather for students prior to testing. So if we've got teachers not clicking on those test information pages and looking at them, then that means they're opening up test sessions and going blind into what they need prior to testing. So it really is important that our teachers are at least opening those test pages up. They don't have to print them if they don't want to, but they need to be looking at them. Okay. Tips pages seem to be updating between testlets faster this year. Yeah, so Tara Lynn, that algorithm, is running a lot quicker, and that tips page delivers down as soon as that new test session pops in. And so we are actually looking way better on our numbers compared to last year. But really we want to see that down to zero. We want all of those tips pages looked at. Okay, next slide. So just some reminder about the dashboards. So not only do you have those data extracts in DLM to monitor things, you also have some just really quick look dashboards, which is where I pulled some of our state level information today. So you've got a dashboard that quickly gives you high level look at where you are in first contact survey status, testing progress, and then this testing outside of hours is one that I want you to be monitoring. And we're going to be looking at that as well. So you may start getting emails from me. We have set our hours to be 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., which is a really large range for testing. So if any testlets have been submitted, or opened or looked at outside of those hours, it tags that and puts that into this dashboard. The ones that I want you to look for and are going to require additional investigation are the ones that are highlighted here. So if you get into that testing outside of hours dashboard and you see an exit does not save, that means what happens is that testlet was opened up and looked at and gotten out of without entering any responses. If it was submitted, then that is a big problem, and especially if it's something that you're not anticipating or done on a weekend. And then if you see other, it means that for some other reason something had happened with that testlet, and those are the three things to investigate. We ask you to investigate those and see what you come up with. And over the last couple of years, we have found some misadministration happening with teachers. So we do ask you to look at that. If you see just test reset, please don't worry about those. It was some glitch in the system or DLM's doing whatever they're doing on the back end, test reset. So it's those three that you're looking at. You also have a dashboard to look at short duration. And so what short duration does is it will tag any testlets that have been completed by a student in under 1 minute. It may be okay and valid, or it may not. So if you see a lot of those short durations, kind of look for some additional information in there. It will tell you the teacher and the student. And so that again just would require some further investigation. But it's those testing outside of hours for sure that we want to look at. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, special circumstance codes. So, new this year, you can set those special circumstance codes, is what DLM calls them, or our non-participant codes, and you can do that at the student level. So, some of our students not rostered, that may be appropriate. If you don't want those testlets to deliver down for them to accidentally maybe be assessed by a teacher, you cannot roster those students and just set that special circumstance code at the student level, and then it ensures that no testing will happen. You can do it at a subject level, or you can still do it at the test level like the old way. And again, only district test coordinators or building test coordinators are allowed to set those special circumstance codes. And then on the DLM district Padlet, you'll find that TA document that walks you through how to do it. And it's updated this year with the codes and then screenshots in the three different ways that you can engage in setting those special circumstance codes. Okay. Next slide. And then a friendly reminder of the checklist that we have for test administrators. So here's the things that are required by teachers to get in a place to administer the assessments. This is also found on our Padlets that you can, print out or send off to teachers. So this is just kind of their process so that they know what they need to do in order to do testing. And I think that might be maybe one more slide. Oh, so there's the links to the Padlets. So there's the DLM district user resource Padlet. That's for you guys as coordinators with all your technical assistance documents. The training recording that we did in October is on there too. So all of your stuff is there. And then just a nice reminder, we do have a Padlet that is geared directly towards teachers. So that's where we kind of house most of that information for you. And then my last slide is I brought to you earlier this year around all of our 1% information under that ESSA federal regulation. We as a state tested over 1%, so we've had lots of fun things happening. And we have had to update our definition of students with the most significant cognitive disabilities, and we changed that alternate assessment participation criteria. We were waiting for our definition to officially update in board rule. And so that is now done. And as of March 1st, that board rule is now posted with all that new criteria. So we were able to come in and get it updated in all of our guidance documents. So everything should hopefully be aligned. And that new criteria is out. And so let me know if you find some place that it has not been updated, please let me know so I can ensure that we do that. And then Ashley, let's see, have SPED teachers been notified? So yes, your special education directors have very much been notified through all of this and are working through some transition plans. And I've actually been out doing some observations with some of your special ed directors in classrooms and trying to help support transitioning some of these kiddos that may no longer qualify into the gen ed setting. And what we have asked is we know that some of these kiddos, it may take a couple years to kind of get them in that space. So we have asked, that by the DLM testing window, the March 2028, all students in the state should be falling under the new participation guidelines. So any newly qualifying kiddos, like starting now, fall under the new criteria. And then districts are really have to think thoughtfully about how we transition some of those students that were previously qualified and no longer qualify. So yes. So if you do find that your special ed folks are not really sure about this or need some support or help, please reach out to me, have them reach out to me. But it's been shared pretty widely. Brian, okay, so our UTREX team showed us some new fields in our SIS that are being reported to the state. The fields were to list the ELA math and science assessment teacher. My question is, do you want who is teaching the students or who is administering the assessment? Okay, Brian, thank you. So this is something that we have been working on all year. We haven't brought a lot of information to you yet because, and Maureen, feel free to jump in. We don't have, I think, this picking up on our end. So we have been trying to find a way and navigate a space where we can start doing that rostering for you through those nightly uploads. But in order to do that, we had to know which teacher students are supposed to be rostered to. We could not just solely rely on course codes because we cannot require students to be only enrolled in essential elements courses. So we have inclusionary practices and the way IDEA and FAPE work, like students could be enrolled in a gen ed course and still be receiving their instruction in the essential elements and take an alternate assessment. So we have had this build out in place where when you click the 1% flag, and I hope this is how it's working, Brian, is when you click the 1% flag, it's going to then lead you into that space where you'll plug in the teacher's Cactus ID for ELA math and science. And this will be who the teacher is that's administering the assessment. And so what we're hoping to do is to move out of the space of manually rostering and that it just runs automated through the API and how we're kind of moving students in and out. So that is the hope, and we're hoping to have that working next year. So that's a great question. I don't know if
And
Maureen has more to add to that.
yeah, it looks like we are successfully receiving those cactus IDs via LEA Utrecht submission. So that's a good news. And I've seen it in data gateways. I think I've seen it in data gateway. I've definitely seen it in Utrecht submissions that teacher cactus ID is coming through. So that's great. We hesitate to make any sort of changes to data pulls by LEAs during a testing window. So definitely not going to happen this year, but I'm hopeful that for next year we'll have those rosters in DLM. Yeah.
That'll take a huge burden off you guys to be able to do that.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
So yeah, so I think it's great practice, Brian. Fill that information out now as it's coming. And then hopefully we can start doing some testing after. We don't want to do it while the window's open because that would be, I think, Brian, you'd be really mad at me if we wiped out all of your rosters tomorrow. So, okay. And I think that's it for me. So please reach out. Let me know if you have any questions.
Megan, I think you were going to do these to start us out.
You are correct. Thank you. So we have some updates per our high school, kind of that transition from Utah Aspire Plus to Rise. And just to clarify, the points of contact for our secondary assessment development would be myself for secondary ELA, and then Sam for secondary science, and then of course Katie for secondary math. If you have any questions pertaining to this transition from Utah Aspire Plus over into Rise, we would encourage you to reach out to us at any time, as well as Teresa McIntyre. She can help in this area as well. So going to our next slide. Just to review the why, we've actually been getting a lot of questions about, well, why is this all happening? And this was actually not the most recent legislative session. It was the one that took place in 2025. And it was just a change in code. So we have linked on this slide SB 39. So hopefully this is review, and just remembering that that this change in the 2025 general session is what brought grades 9 and 10 into the Rise fold. So just reminding you that Utah Aspire Plus is officially retiring at the end of this school year. And then next year, 9th and 10th grade students will be in the Rise system. So it's almost like going back to those old Sage days, right? So we just wanted to highlight some of those changes that you can expect to see next year. And hopefully this information will help provide questions that you may be getting in your LEAs. Next. All right, and I believe this one is still me, correct? Sorry. Slide numbers always change and then I get thrown off. Okay, so next year, these are the tests that will be available for 9th and 10th grade on Rise. So in 2027, I know, already a year ahead, it'll be ELA for grades 9 and 10. And those will, once we have those blueprints fully formed and fleshed out, of course, we will send those out and make sure that you all have that information. They should be very similar to the current ELA blueprints for the lower grades, okay? So really leaning into assessing those reading standards. And then Sam and Katie can speak more to the specific content assessments for their content areas. So again, you'll see secondary math 1, secondary math 2. Um, and then I know there are questions about standards for math. Katie's going to get into that, but then also you're going to have content specific tests for earth and space science, biology, chemistry, and physics. So again, moving away from an end of grade test as we've had to end of course tests. Just verifying there will, oh, sorry, things are coming in. There will not be benchmarks available for grades 9 and 10, only summative next year. Benchmarks will be available in fall 2028. So there are no benchmarks available currently in the RISE system, and I do not believe there are plans, unless funding happens, to have benchmarks for RISE for those grades in the future. We do have benchmarks available though for ninth and 10th grade in UTIPs. Okay. Those were the benchmarks that were always available in the past, but they have moved over to, again, UTIPs. And all of those benchmarks we have taken a look at, and I can say for language arts, ensured that those benchmarks align to the new standards. If you have any questions regarding UTIPs and using those high school grades 9 and 10 benchmarks, Elise can always help with how to access those and how to use those. And then again, in 2028, I don't believe, and this would be more for Sid or Teresa, I don't believe there are any plans unless things change, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we have to build up our summative bank to a certain level because we give adaptive assessments in RISE. And that requires a larger item bank than we needed in Utah Aspire Plus because that was a fixed form assessment. So we are going to be building up our summative bank first, and hopefully in future years we'll start being able to add some benchmarks, but we currently don't have a timeline for that. So in our legislative session, they definitely were making some budget cuts. So that has impacted USBE, I think, across the board.
Can I jump in super fast just for math specifically on benchmarks? We do have secondary math 1 benchmarks because they currently exist for those advanced middle schoolers that are taking that course. So those are available and will continue to be available to our 9th graders taking secondary math 1 starting next school year. So that is the one exception for high school benchmarks. Secondary math 1, we do have those still available.
And then we have another question in the chat. Oh goodness, every time I read, we get more. Okay, here we go. Scrolling back up. Will there be high school interim testing available? And they are end of course based, not end of year, correct? I can say yes, you are correct. They are end of course, not end of year. And that was specific language in the change of legislation and again, the 25 legislative session. And Teresa, I'm going to let answer the plan for high school interim testing.
Same thing. We actually use the same item banks for our benchmarks and our interims. So those are still going to be a little ways out as we build up that item bank. So as soon as we have enough that we have we have enough in our summative banks to administer, just not enough as we would like to. So that's where we're going to be putting our focus is to really beef up our summative bank before we start moving things over to benchmarks and interims. So we hear you. We really do value and appreciate that you value benchmarks and interims as well. And so we are going to be working to build those up as soon as we possibly can.
Thank you. And then there was a question for 11th and 12th graders. That is not an ELA one, but I
I was going to say maybe we finish the rest of our slides and see if they answer some of the questions that people are putting in the chat. And if not, we will come back to those questions because both Katie and Sam have some additional slides that hopefully will answer some of your questions.
I love that ELA for once is the easy one. So take it away, complicated math and science.
Okay, so I think I have the next slide. Go ahead. Yep. Okay, so this is a summary of the courses that are going to populate the specific assessments. So for High School Rise, we're developing 4 assessments, one for biology, chemistry, physics, and earth and space. Within those assessments, different courses will populate that assessment. So those that are taking biology, agricultural science bio, AP bio, IB bio 1, CE bio 1010, with seed will all populate that biology assessment. And that is the same for the other 3 categories. As we administer for the first time in 2027, we'll be going through this process and looking at all of our data. And so the courses under each of these are possibly going to change as we look at data, but this is what we anticipate will populate the proficiencies and the most alignment with the assessment in these courses in high school. And so it will just be your 9th and 10th graders unless you guys opt in for your 11th and 12th graders. So the data that you get back would be specific to 9th and 10th for accountability, but then your 11th and 12th, if you decide to opt in, you would get that for the school, but it wouldn't be counted in your accountability scores. And then the next one I think is Katie. Does anybody have questions on this one? Sorry. Guess that was fast. Sweet. Keep going.
Yeah. The next 2 slides are going to go over our timeline. So Brian, we should be addressing your question about secondary math 3 here in just a second. So this first slide is what is planned for spring of 2027 specifically. So we will have all of our ELA assessments from grade 3 to 10 starting in spring of 27. Science will continue to be 4 to 8, and we will add on our specific content science tests as well for high school, all 4 of those that Sam just talked about. And for math, we will have secondary math 1 and secondary math 2. I want to note here that for spring of 27, all the math assessments are aligned to our current standards. So the 2016 standards that we are still incorporating in classrooms. We'll talk about standards on the next slide in just a minute for math, what that will look like with assessment changes. So for the spring of 27, that does mean that for our lower grades, so 3-8 for ELA, 4-8 for science, standard field testing is still in play as what we've been seeing for the last couple years. But we will have operational field testing for all of the science tests and all of the ELA tests that are high school grades. So that means anything that we're putting out there for our high school testing in those 2 content areas next year will have to go through the standard setting procedure. And so we will have delayed scores for just high school ELA and high school science for fall of 2027 release. That is the plan for those. Math, we are not doing any standard setting yet because we are going to delay that for at least a year, which we'll get to on the next slide in a moment, for when our new standards are hopefully approved by our board in the coming months. So in spring of 27, we will just have our standard field testing that we've already been doing for math. We are noting here that there are no clusters for secondary math 1 or secondary math 2 for the spring 27 administration. So your lower grades will still continue to see those in field testing next spring, but they will not appear in field testing for secondary math 1 and 2. And we plan to have immediate scores available because we are aligning all of our math tests to the current standards. So scoring should not be affected next spring for math. I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions before I go to the 2028 timeline. Wouldn't the delay be until fall of 28? That will only be for math, Cassidy. So the high school scoring for science and ELA will just be delayed from typical immediate scores in the spring to that fall of 2027. So it's just a few months delay as we get standards setting completed in the summer of 2027 for those two content areas. For ELA. Megan, do you want to speak to that one? Sorry, I meant for ELA is what she said.
Okay, so yes, we will have to do standard setting. So next year will be an operational field test. And because it's going to be a new blueprint and everything, and there's obviously significant changes, it's going to be computer adaptive again. Um, we do have to do a standard setting. So, that standard setting should be planned to take place, goodness, years, summer of 2027.
Yes.
So the scores will be released then in the fall of 2027. So not 2028. Um, so I guess technically it would be the 2027-2028 school year, but they will be released in the 2027 fall of that school year. So yeah, I know school
Yes.
years. I tell you what. And when we're thinking this far in advance, I know. Let's see.
There were some questions about how the delay in results will affect accountability for science and ELA. The high school assessments will be part of 27, school year 27 accountability. I don't
Yes,
know if
I can respond to
Sid, do you want to
that.
speak to that? Okay.
The plan for accountability will be similar to the timeline from this year where we had the delay with the ELA standard setting for the new ELA standards. So the timeline will probably be similar in 27 for accountability as it was this year, where the school report cards were released in January. We're actively working with CAI to get that standard setting held as early as possible so we get results back as soon as possible. That could mean like a month earlier, like we might be able to get standard setting done earlier in July, possibly late June. We're working on that so that, but that would really only buy us back like a month. So it would be like December instead of January that the accountability results would be available. So it still likely will be a delay both in 27 for the ELA and science, and then again in 28 for all math, because that won't just be high school math, it'll be all math in 28. So there will be a delay to accountability. Not this fall. So this fall we should have back to the like September, October timeline that we have been on when we don't have standard setting. But in fall of 27, there will be a delay with accountability with new high school ELA and science standard setting.
Thanks, Sid. Why don't we let's do one more slide on the 2028 and then we'll circle back because Sam, there's a couple questions about science in the chat and I'll have you speak to those if that's okay in just a second. So Emily, you go to the next slide. So for 2028, ELA and science should be in full swing. Standard settings done. So we will have all of our grades 3 through 10 tested, including those high school science courses, back to standard field testing and immediate scores available once again starting in spring of 2028. For math, however, this is the year that we are hoping to now include secondary math 3 for those advanced 9th and 10th graders, and then optional for 11th graders. These will be hopefully aligned to the new standards as we are waiting for those to be approved by the board, which means all of our math courses starting from grade 3 up, those will be operationally field tested items. And so math will then be going through our standard setting procedure in summer of 2028. And then math will have that delay in scoring until fall of 2028. So a year later than our high school science and ELA courses. And I think, Em, if you click once, there should be just a quick note here on this slide that pops up that just says the secondary math 3 release and the new standard alignment is absolutely dependent on the timeline of when our board approves those standards. And so this is kind of a tentative timeline for math, And then we'll keep you up to date if that does change, of course. Let me see if there's anything for math. Can a seventh or eighth grader take secondary math 2 or secondary math 3? Thanks, Elise, for responding to that in the chat. Yes, because RISE is a course-based assessment, it depends on what course they are enrolled. So if they are enrolled in that course, then they can absolutely take that test at the end of the year. Why don't we backtrack on the slides to Sam's science ones? So Em, I think that's like 2 slides before this, and she can speak to some of the questions about enrolling in these. I think there was one from Jasmine.
I think Jasmine's question, if I understand correctly, is how the students would be placed in the assessment. So I believe it would be similar to the other RISE rostering, the way that that works. If they take the course, then, but I'm not sure, then the assessment should be available. Is that correct?
Maureen, can you just speak to really quickly just the rostering process?
Sure. So a student will just need to be enrolled in a course that has a rostering triggering core code. So it's just like 3rd through 8th. If you have a student that is in the grade range 3 through 10 now, that is in a course with the right core code, they will get a test. We don't have those core code lists quite yet, but we will in June. So stay tuned for those. But it's just like RISE. If you are in the grade range and you are enrolled in a course with that core code, you get a test.
Awesome. Thanks, Maureen. Were there any other questions in here that did not get answered in the meantime?
I will just add, Katie, that means that 11th and 12th graders may be rostering for these assessments. As an LEA, you can choose whether or not you have them actually take it. So it is required for any student in 9th or 10th grade. This applies for any of the math or the science. So students in that course will roster, but you choose as an LEA whether or not you want students to take the assessment. That provides data for teachers, for your schools, for your districts on how the system is doing within those science and math courses, but it will not count for accountability. 9th and 10th graders are required to take it. There's no choice for them. So it will be opt-in for those 11th and 12th graders.
Yeah.
It is auto-populates through your SRS what the student is enrolled in. We are working with CAI to have some type of code that you can input for any 11th and 12th graders so that they just like clear out of the system and don't show as being untested, because, you know, we don't want you to be able to pull up that untested report and be like, how do we have so many students? So we're working with them on something that will help you eliminate 11th and 12th graders from those courses if you don't want them to take the assessment.
Great.
Yes,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to find, there was another one. So those that take the computer science course in high school will not populate one of our science assessments. It is not included in one of these. So it also, that science course, the 9th and 10th graders that take it, since it does not populate a science test, that piece would also not populate in a part of your proficiency for your school, like for accountability.
Mhm. And I think there was one other question about whether, oh, sorry, Sid, were you going to chime in on that?
Yeah, that's what I think that's exactly the one I was going to look at too, about Jeff's question about the winter window for the people on trimesters. Typically, we don't have a fall administration on a new year of field testing. We do have our annual planning meeting with Cambium at the end of April. And I think that will be part of our discussion, is whether or not we're able to administer fall summative assessments. So to be determined. We know that gets real tricky for people that are on trimester schedules, particularly when we have course-based assessments. So it's something that we're planning on discussing with Cambium, and understand that's a request from people. So If it's available, it likely won't be available in November like they are now. It likely will be a little bit later, but we know that window will be important for those of you that are on trimesters. So something that we're aware of and working towards for sure.
And then I think Mark asked about the math test in spring 2027. I don't know what that was in relation to, or if that was just asking which ones again are being offered as far as which tests. I don't know if we do you want to go to the next slide? Because that has all those tests listed one more time. This is the spring 2027 tests that are planned to be administered next year, including all of high school content areas here listed for science, and then math secondary 1 and 2 are added on. Okay. Section.
And then secondary math 3 in 2028, right?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat from
Oh, you're
Yeah,
right.
there's another question about
Yeah.
science. Can you go back to the science
Looking for
course
that
page?
one. 7, 8, and B7. I'm scrolling to find it. I can't see it.
It's almost
you
at
talking-
the end.
Are you talking about from Alex?
Very end.
Yes.
Alex.
Okay. Yeah.
B
Most of
section.
these courses have an A and B section in most schools, but it uses the same course code.
I can answer that one about the A and B sections.
Yes, thank you, Maureen.
So if you have a student enrolled in a class with the same core code, just across 2 different days, A and B, the tiebreakers are going to choose, it's going to go with the core code, the course entry date. Eventually it comes down to the class period, and that's going to be the A. That's probably going to be the A period. It's just going to have to come down to the way you schedule those students. If you started your A section one day after the B section, your B section would win the tiebreakers and they would roster with that B section. That's going to be it might just come down to how you schedule your students, because if they are the same course with the same core code, then our tiebreakers take effect, and that is not a thing we can change. It's not a manual. We can't manually change anything. We would have to think about that one.
Okay. Yeah, and there's a question about students who are taking different science courses in the fall and spring. Will both science tests get populated for spring testing?
Are
As
you
in,
speaking specifically to like the semester long courses? So like if
I mean,
So
you'll only populate in the spring for a class you are currently enrolled in.
Yeah,
So if the
that's
student
nice.
isn't enrolled in that class in the springtime, they're not going to get a test for it.
any other questions coming to mind? We have a couple more slides in this high school section, so hopefully we'll get these answered quickly. AP Chemistry and AP Physics. It looks like AP Chem and AP Physics are on the screen right now for their assessment that they would trigger for science. At least currently. Sam, is that correct? So if they're taking AP, they would just take the same.
yeah, so it would populate, you'd have an AP chemistry assessment and you would have an AP physics assessment, depending on the AP physics they're enrolled in, because we're only including AP physics 1 and physics C mechanics.
And then that would also be optional if they were an 11th or 12th grade student. If they're a 9th or 10th grader, then they would be required.
There's a question about, aren't they required to test at the end of semester courses? That is probably an accountability question.
Can you repeat what the question was? Sorry, I missed it in the chat.
It said, aren't they required to test at the end of semester courses? So somebody asked, what if a student takes 2 science courses in a year that would like require an assessment, but then they would be counting twice? So this is why I'm turning the question over to you.
Yeah,
Well, I
I'm
know. Go ahead, Sid.
no, you go ahead, Britt.
Oh, I was going to say, I know with our math courses, when we have the two different courses in the same year, the higher level course is the one that is used in accountability. Um, so I think it's based on LEA choice if they're going to be taking two tests. But correct me if I'm wrong, anyone. But I think that if they're in a course that would take two tests, they can either take two and the higher one is going to be on accountability or the higher level test, just to clarify, will be the one used in accountability.
Yeah, and I think that might be
Does that
something we need to discuss with APAC because that was just a recent change. We just recently changed that rule for
right?
math. Previously, they were taking both math tests, and then I think last year was when that change was made. So I think that's something that we need to discuss with APAC. Additionally, the question about the AP, which courses are enrolling for which tests, that's another question that we've been discussing about standards that align and what they're being assessed on. So I think there are some questions for those students that are participating in both. So like we said, if they're a 10th or 11th grade student, which would likely be most of the kids if they're taking both AP Physics and AP Chem, likely they would be, 11th or 12th grade students, not 9th or 10th grade, but regardless, something that I think would be a good conversation for our policy advisors to determine if there's only one assessment, if we kind of go back to the same idea that we did for math and they only take the higher test or the more advanced course test, I'm not sure if that works out as easily for science since it's not necessarily you take one course and then you take the other course. So I think those will be good discussions and things that we have a little bit of time luckily to discuss. So these questions have raised some good things that we need to discuss with our policy advisors and get some feedback for you before we make decisions on those.
Thanks, Sid. Yeah, and I think Terilyn, to your comment, yeah, that has historically been what we've done in the past, where especially for those like accelerated math courses that are completing, Math 7 and then Math 8, for instance, they would take the Math 7 course or the assessment when they finish their coursework halfway through the school year, and then they would take Math 8 in the spring. But last year we did have APAC weigh in, and that there was a change for math that you would just have our students take that highest level course assessment, as Brittany was speaking to in the spring. I think it was optional that they could take the lower level one middle of the school year, but it was no longer a requirement as long as they actually finished the coursework for the higher level math course. So, because we do have some LEAs that will maybe start or do a whole year of Math 7 and then maybe they start Math 8 but don't finish it until the next year. So, they do have to finish that coursework in order for that to trigger the higher level math assessment in the spring. But for high school, we do not have a math test or any other high school RISE test available in that winter assessment window. It will only be spring to start with. So in the 26-27 school year, we will only have high school tests available in spring of 27. So there won't even be an option for the middle of the year. Do students who skip the testing day at the end of the course, are we able to re-enroll them in the course later on to generate the test and get the student tested and have them count towards participation? I'm going to let Maureen or Brittany answer that.
Only one test will count toward participation per full academic year. So if they're taking two, we're still only going to be using one of those tests for participation. Does that answer the question, Alex?
Where you're going to have to make really good friends with your registrar to put them back a course.
And you won't be friends with your
Which
registrar
you
for
won't be
long
friends
after
with them
that.
for much longer.
I would suggest, I mean, I know it's an end of course test, but I would suggest you pad it out a little bit so that you have time for makeups.
Yeah.
Because re-enrolling a student just for the purposes of taking the assessment, that's gonna be messy. Messy, messy.
Well, and especially if it's not going to be the one that's counted towards your participation. So if you're taking two, um, if we can go to the slide, I think 49 was the next one. The only reason I can probably think of at the moment to want to make or have your students take those other assessments is for that data that would populate that classroom usable data. Because otherwise, it's not, if you're taking those multiple, like Brittany said, you're only going to have one that counts towards participation. So it wouldn't change that side, but it could possibly change the data that you look at and at the LEA level and classroom or systems level data. And that can you go to 49, Emily? And one more. Yep, perfect. Okay, so the main difference is, and in those that have done RISE in the past from third grade up to eighth grade, understand these things about RISE, but we're moving to that computer adaptive from a fixed form assessment. So instead of every ninth and 10th grader having the exact same test and the test being the same for the calendar year, it's going to be adaptive and different. Course-based instead of grade-based, it's not timed. They're aligned to Utah core standards. There's differences with interaction. They have to interact with every piece of the passage and the item before they can move forward. After our standard setting and after this first administration, there is that immediate scoring with your scaled score and proficiency data. And the data that you get at the classroom level and systems level is different. So instead of it'll be more standards-based classroom level kind of, are we teaching the Utah Seed standards? Are we proficient? Are there holes? Are there gaps? Are there things, specific classes for teachers that might change their planning for the next years, things like that. And so I feel like that part might be the link that could make some administrators want to have other students take multiple assessments throughout the year. But otherwise, it doesn't change your like outcome for school accountability, if I understood that correctly, Brittany. So the benefit would be having that data for your teachers and for your schools, but it wouldn't change your accountability or report card data. I went through that fast, but if you have questions about this and other questions about the other slides, please let us know too. But I hope that helped clear some of that double assessment kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think a good thing to know is for this slide in particular that Sam was just speaking to, I'm sure a lot of you in this audience are familiar with this information, but many, many, many of our high school educators have never experienced RISE. Their students have, but our educators have not. And so they are going to be very unfamiliar with how different RISE is from Utah Aspire Plus. And so speaking to that, if you go to the next slide, we do have some resources that we are working on making now, and we're planning to get those out to you next month to this group. And we also do have some existing parent resources for RISE that live on our USBE website. Links are here, and we will work on updating those as we get more information for high school changes. But those do include the types of RISE assessments. So like what are the benchmarks, interims, summative, and training tests? How are they used? And what do we get from those? And then also for RISE scores, how to make sense of those. We have some parent resources that cover all of that information, and we will make some more for next month. That is our plan. So that's it for high school. Gosh, I'm sorry, that was a lot of information, but if there's any other questions, we can put them in the chat.
Did we answer Jasmine's question, this last one? students taking courses every 6 weeks, you need to ensure 9th and 10th are in a science course when they get pulled from SIS.
That's correct. If you are not enrolled in a course with the correct with a core code, you will not be pulled in for an assessment. So your students need to be enrolled in a course in order to be pulled in for a test. I wouldn't say that the tests disappear when the course ends, Alex, but they are not available to students if they are not enrolled in a class. They cannot access a test if they are not enrolled in a class. And that's it. If they need to be currently enrolled in a class to have a test.
Can I really quickly jump in? I've been getting a couple of private chats. So, just to reiterate on this slide, we do have more resources coming that are going to include, I'd like to say a one pager, but I think it'll be a front and back one pager that you will be able to share with your educators. And also, spoiler alert, Katie was very intentional about her coming soon image here because we're going to actually be making some videos that you can share as well with your educators. And those resources will be on our USBE website that you can use. So just stay tuned as those different resources that you can use with your educators and everything. As those become available, we'll make sure that we announce it to this whole group and provide the links. And hopefully it won't be something that people feel like, oh, we really have to dig to find this and everything. We could just provide those links directly to you, or even send them out as attachments in future AD memos and everything. So we do have more resources coming that will hopefully aid you and assist you in these conversations with all of your educators. So thank you for those of you that are reaching out in the chat.
All right, friends. Emily, go ahead and go to the next slide. These are just your generalized reminders. There's nothing really new here. As an LEA, you do have the autonomy and the responsibility to set your very own 8-week window within our set testing window. So generally speaking, most LEAs set that from their last Friday before the last week of school. But there are some who actually prefer to set that even earlier, which is totally fine. We just don't recommend testing during your last week, as there tends to be lots of celebrations, last minute interruptions, classroom cleaning, those types of things. They are just not ideal for the summative testing environment. And also when it comes to those activities, we want your students to be able to participate in those. Okay. During this time, though, the benchmark modules still totally available for use. So make sure your teachers know they still have access to those tools if they choose to use them. The Spanish adaptive functionality is provided for students who qualify in both math and science for those content areas. Be sure these students are in a separate session, though, because the required scripting is also provided in that Spanish language, and that's what's expected. As a reminder, with scripting, most of it is embedded within the system these days. However, there are still some components required to be read by your proctors. I want to specifically call out here the 5-minute warning for students who are supposed to have that read to them prior to a test session ending. Okay, so also, if you haven't already, please ensure students and teacher devices are functioning properly, as well as any accommodations that need to be set on a student's settings, that those have been applied, or any participation codes that are going to keep a student from testing. For example, the 204 parental exclusion code. Emily, go ahead and go to the next slide. I reviewed this information in a lot of detail during our RISE training a few weeks ago. It's also included in the Tide Guide starting on page 159 for an LEA user, but remember that you should be monitoring your test completion just within your respective LEAs. I would recommend running a report of tests not started roughly the week or so before the end of your LEA testing window, so you can reach out to schools as needed while still allowing them enough time to test any makeup students. I see in the chat, I probably missed this. Are high school assessments still time restricted? Marie, currently, yes. Like for Utah Aspire Plus, right now, those ones still will have a timer. Moving forward, next year's administration, they will not. Yep, no problem. Emily, next slide. I also reviewed this during our recent RISE training, but just ensure that you are monitoring the test appeals within your LEAs. This is recommended as kind of a daily to multiple times a day task when your testing window is open, but you can cut that way back outside the testing window to roughly once a week. Basically, anytime there's a number other than 0 in that little blue circle, you have a test appeal waiting to be processed. During low test volume times, I tend to check these about weekly, and I just reach out to you if you have any lingering appeals that haven't been processed. But during the summative window, I also tend to check these more frequently, just so that they're addressed more timely, so that we can get those kids tested. Next slide. Last month, I talked about these RISE expiration timelines, but if you've been paying attention to the more recent AD memos since our meeting last month, you know we've adjusted these timelines to better accommodate your students and your teachers. So hopefully this will cut down on the number of appeal requests you get for reopening interim assessments and especially your benchmark modules. As mentioned last month, but still incredibly relevant, please pay attention when creating and approving those, as they are more likely going to be for a reopening of a test, not a reset of a test. When you reset a test, the student is going to be required to start over completely. It wipes the entire slate clean. It's far more rare that we want a student to restart. This is generally reserved for when a teacher inadvertently has a student begin a summative test when an interim or a benchmark was the intention, that we want to have reset. If it's an actual benchmark or interim, that's when we just want to have reopened. I'm also aware that there were benchmarks started before this expiration extension was in place. And if that's the case, those benchmark modules could still have expired on that previous timeframe. So those tests can still have a test appeal created to reopen them, okay, if that's necessary. But just know moving forward, there's a much broader span of time for these to be completed, which should cut down on those appeals for you. If you have questions regarding the test appeals process or want to ensure you are approving or denying experiences appropriately, you can reach out to me or Scott, and we can kind of be your thought partner there and bounce ideas back and forth. Next slide. For scoring this year, there will be immediate scoring for all of your content and grade levels for spring of 2026. The only exception to this is the first 500 writing submissions, which are also hand scored, just so as to better train the automated scoring system that we will use further. Moving on. Our development team has worked with CAI to create and post writing rubrics and annotated writing samples for your use as well. The RISE reporting guide has guidance for all of the RISE assessments, though, so you can find guidance for benchmarks, interims, and summatives. Just know that with summative data, performance by item information is not going to be seen at any level. You just have access to this strength or weakness data at the aggregate levels, but you do have that performance by item data available on benchmarks and interim assessments. And then we're going to move on to Utah Aspire Plus. So these are your general Utah Aspire Plus reminders. The window opened at the beginning of the month. We're about halfway through, okay? The window will close May 8th, so be sure that you complete any of the checks that you need to do prior to students testing. However, many of you have already started, which is wonderful. If you haven't yet, though, make sure that you do the app check before, just because things like Spotify or iTunes, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, any web browser, things like that are running in the background are actually going to keep your secure browser from functioning appropriately and are going to cause you some headaches in that respect. The Spanish adaptive functionality is also provided for students who qualify for 9th and 10th grade here in all of these content areas. Just be sure, again, that these students are in a separate session so that the required scripting can be provided to them in the language that they are expecting. As a reminder here as well, just like RISE, much of the scripting is embedded, but specific to the Utah Aspire Plus tests, the 5-minute warning for students is also embedded. They will get a notification on their screen. Okay, but because there's just still some required scripting, please make sure to communicate how and where to access the TAM to your schools. I mention this because just this week we've had a handful of teachers reach out to Pearson's help desk asking where to find those scripts. So just make sure that they know. And it's not just a bad idea ever to reiterate the URL for the resource center because lots of other things are found there, like the score interpretation guide, not just the TAM. There's lots of other resources. And as always, if you haven't already, add those accommodations and participation codes for students who need them. Next slide. I reviewed this information in more detail during our Utah Aspire Plus training back in January. It's also in the TAM starting on page 195, but the monitoring of testing for Utah Aspire Plus is a little bit different than the RISE one, but still done through the reporting menu under progress. This is going to show you the total number of tests associated with your LEA, as well as how many have been submitted, started, not started, and scored. So you can kind of get a gauge of where you are in your testing process. Next slide. The activity menu shows both daily activity as well as provides the option for a customizable date range to show test completion. So you can check what's happening just today in your LEA, or if you want to look at the entire window, or if you want to look at a specific week. Your schools and their sessions are organized at the bottom by test and org as well. So this information is refreshed on the Atom site every 5 minutes. So it does stay pretty current throughout your day. I don't know about you, but I keep this dashboard as well as the RISE dashboard open at all times during the testing window because it just helps me also monitor state completion as well as system usage as we go throughout the season itself. Last slide I have for you. For Utah Aspire Plus reporting, your teachers have access to the preliminary student data within 24 hours of their students' completion. And this preliminary student data includes the scale score, their proficiency level, a predicted ACT score, and some standard performance information. Okay. The score interpretation guide is posted on the Utah Aspire Plus Resource Center, and it explains the elements of the ISR as well as your preliminary student data reports. It also has guidance for the test score files and the test data files. Also, Joe, though, remember that access to reporting is limited to those who have accounts in Atom. So some of your teachers, most likely, if they're not instructors of like a core subject, are not actually going to see these reports unless you share them. There were a couple of teachers who reached out to the Pearson Help Desk asking for access to reporting, and it turned out the teacher never actually had an account in there to begin with because they don't teach the courses that are going to trigger the tests. Okay, so there's a little nuance there that not every single teacher who proctors a test is going to have access to those reports. If you have questions regarding any administration practices for RISE or Utah Aspire Plus, though, don't hesitate to reach out. Always happy to help.
Okay, good morning. We only have about 10 more minutes left to pay attention, so I think we can survive this. Just a reminder, overall for accessibility, that the main resource that you should be referring to is our Utah Accessibility Accommodations and Participation Policy. I'm receiving a large amount of emails, which I always love and welcome, but most of the questions that I receive, the answers can be found in our accommodations policy. I have always recommended and continue to recommend your administrators at the LEA level, so your principals and assistant principals who are likely the administrators sitting in on IEP and 504 meetings, they should have this document and be familiar with it when they are making decisions for teams. And then that just like reduces the questions that could occur later on if they maybe didn't make, a right assessment accommodation decision. If you're thinking about it in the moment, you don't have to backtrack later on in the assessment season. I'm getting a lot of questions about that people do refer to the policy, but are confused because they say, oh, it's not listed as an accommodation. Not all instructional accommodations are necessarily outlined as an accommodation for statewide assessment. So if, for example, extended time for RISE, since RISE is not timed, it's not applicable. Get a lot of questions about alternative location for testing or one-on-one administration. We don't have guidelines around that. That is an LEA choice. If you have a student, any student, they don't even have to have an IEP or a 504 plan. If you think it's more appropriate for a student to test one-on-one in a room, then that's your choice as an LEA. But we try to have a comprehensive guide of all of these main issues that come up during testing. And this is the manual that you reference that information. As a reminder, we adhere to IDA policy in which we only allow accommodations on statewide assessments that will deliver a valid and reliable score. So we have very few restrictions when it comes to accommodations, but if there are certain ones that are not allowed, it's because we want to make certain that we are measuring the student's knowledge of the standards being assessed. And then another tip that is good for anybody that's going to be administering a test and for students is use your training and practice test. I know Elise refers to this in her trainings and throughout our AD memos and whatnot, but it's particularly helpful. It is concerning when a teacher is going to be proctoring an exam to a student. You could, especially if you have a kiddo who does not know how to use all of those resources, you could provide assistance to direct them to those resources. But if you've never seen the testing platform, looked at a training test or anything like that before as a teacher in a room with the student, then you're not going to be able to provide that assistance to them. So I would really encourage using those as a way to be able to help students. Next slide. Okay, so when you are looking at that policy document in our appendix, we have each statewide assessment with its own section, and within each section, there is a direct link to the main hubs of that assessment. So in the RISE appendix, you are linked to the RISE assessment portal, which the RISE portal has many necessary documents, especially when it is concerning accessibility and accommodations, which includes our test administration manual, which outlines all the resources and accommodations for students. It includes guidance on how those resources are used and how they function within that testing system. So if you, this again is your one quick stop to get access to all of those documents that is going to best answer these burning frequently asked questions during the assessment window. Next slide. And then for each assessment in that document, we have it broken down into differentiating between our resources that are available to all students and then our testing accommodations. And again, I get so many questions every day saying, oh, the student has the accommodations, but I don't see it, as an allowed accommodation. That's because it's probably listed as a resource. One of the most common ones that I receive is, I have a student who is allowed a human reader, or I have a student who needs text to speech. That is built into our RISE platform. So it's nothing that you have to enable. Every student has access to text to speech in RISE and Utah Aspire Plus. It's built in for them. But again, that's listed under a resource, not an accommodation. So that's kind of where some confusion comes in. Next slide. Okay. And while we strive to make the most comprehensive manual for the most common accessibility issues for students, we're not going to address every single thing. There is never an exhaustive list of every single possibility. That is why there is an I in IEP. It's individualized. So if you ever have a question that you can't find the answer to and it's not outlined, just email me. And if needed, there is a USBE exceptional accommodation request form that you can fill out, and I can give you approval or rejection for those unique circumstances. because another thing I've heard and seen in emails from assessment directors is, oh, well, it's not outlined, so therefore it's not allowed. And that's not necessarily true. It might be, again, no list is comprehensive. So that's why we have this exceptional request form for unique circumstances. Next slide. I think that might be it.
Okay, I think that was our last slide. Sorry
Okay.
for the whirlwind. We were gonna take a break and then we thought, no, we'll get through it faster and then had a lot more questions. So I apologize for no break, but give you back a little bit of time now, everyone. If you have other questions, we can stay on for a few more minutes if there are additional questions for us. And as always, if you think of other things, please reach out. We're happy to engage in conversations with all of you. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today and get feedback and for us to get some feedback from you as well as for you to get some information from our team. Appreciate the team here at USBE as always. They do an excellent job with responding to questions and knowing and understanding the needs from all of you. So I appreciate working with them and appreciate the partnership with all of you. So we'll hang out for another minute or two, but if you have other questions, let us know. Thank you.
Oh, I do have one more thing I wanted to say about accommodations. There are just a couple of accommodation requests that require USB approval. So, for example, in RISE, well, in Utah Aspire Plus, you have to submit a request within those systems, TIDE or ADAM, if a student wants to use speech to text or a scribe. And in the policy, it states to try to give us 3 to 4 weeks notice. I obviously know that we're in the testing window. That's not going to happen. And I'm happy to approve those. I'm approving them every day as fast as I can. However, there are, and you might have received an email from me, there are people who are submitting requests literally less than 24 hours before the student test. I literally am the human that goes in and turns on those accommodations. What's really concerning is if you send out the request, you need to wait for it to be approved. And even if it's not USB approval, you should always double check a student's TIDE settings before they start an assessment. Because what I have noticed is it's usually a principal or assistant principal who submits it. They submit the request, the student's testing in less than 24 hours. And then I go and check the student. They've already started the test without the accommodation. And I've emailed people in those circumstances. But if you could just remind your administrators, whoever your personnel is that is submitting those requests, you should be doing it hopefully in a more timely manner than 24 hours before a student test. And if it is a last minute request, please, please, please double check those student settings before they start a test.
Thanks. And then at least there's a question about high school training next year. Did you see that question?
Yeah, I put the response that I plan
Okay.
to, just like I do, I will do an LEA
Okay.
training, but LEA leaders hold the responsibility of training their teachers. But you can use any of my stuff or send them to the YouTube link if you feel like it would be helpful. It's usually just a lot for teachers.
Thank you. All right, and it's looking like that's all of the questions. So thank you. Have a nice day.